I never expected a single whispered sentence to split my life in two. But that's exactly what happened the moment my cousin leaned toward me on the dimly lit back porch and said, "I think you're hiding from yourself." Her words struck me harder than the July thunderstorm rolling in behind us, and for a moment, all I could do was stare at the peeling wood grain beneath my hands, pretending I understood what she meant even though my heartbeat gave me away. I'd come to her house to escape the noise in my own head, not to hear it echoed by someone else. The day had been heavy, one of those days where every reflection felt like a stranger staring back, so visiting Carmen felt like the safest option. She'd always had this way of looking straight through the masks people wore, as if their expressions were made of glass and she could trace every crack. Still, I didn't think the conversation would turn inward like that. Not toward me, not toward the thing I'd been avoiding nomming for years. She shifted beside me, her braid brushing my shoulder like an accidental nudge from fate. "You tense up," she continued softly, "every time you think someone, watching you, like you're afraid they'll notice what you're trying not to notice yourself." I pretended to laugh. It came out thin, brittle, and unconvincing. "I'm just tired." "Liam," she said, and somehow the way she said my name felt like being held and confronted all at once. "You're not tired. You're uncomfortable in your own skin. I see it every time you're here." I turned away, watching the first streaks of rain cut across the yard. My throat tightened. I didn't know how to explain the truth I'd been dodging for years, the strange, dreamlike pull toward a version of myself I could never quite admit out loud. A version that made me feel like a misplaced puzzle piece in my own life. Carmen scooted her chair closer until our knees almost touched. "You know you can talk to me, right?" she said. "I'm not here to judge. I worry about you." The sincerity in her voice thawed something in me, something fragile and fearful but desperate to breathe. I nodded, barely. She studied my face, then stood abruptly and disappeared inside the house. I thought she'd dropped the subject and felt a confusing mix of relief and disappointment. But when she came back, she was carrying a box. A simple cardboard box sealed with lavender tape. She set it on the porch table and gently pushed it toward me. "Open it." My fingers hesitated above the lid. The rain began tapping softly on the roof, a rhythm that felt almost like a countdown. When I finally lifted the flaps, my breath caught. Inside lay cloth, delicate colors, soft fabrics, pieces of an identity I'd only allowed myself to imagine in the quietest corners of my mind. It looked like someone had assembled an alternate version of me with impossible tenderness and placed it in a box. My pulse stuttered. Carmen exhaled in relief, as if my reaction confirmed something she'd long suspected. "I thought maybe you'd want to try being yourself without fear," she murmured. "Just for a moment, just to see how it feels." My chest tightened in a way that felt both terrifying and liberating. I didn't know what to say, so I touched one of the fabrics, light, soft, shimmering slightly even in the porch's muted light. It felt like touching a truth I wasn't ready for. "I can help," she said. "Only if you want, only if this feels right." I swallowed hard, emotion rising like a tide I couldn't hold back anymore. Something about the rain, the quiet, the warmth in her eyes, it all made me feel like the world had briefly shifted into a place where I could make a choice without consequence. "I'm scared," I whispered before I could stop myself. Carmen nodded, not in pity but understanding. That's usually how the most honest beginnings feel. And in that moment, for the first time in my life, I wondered what beginning she saw in me, what version of myself she believed I could grow into if I stopped running from the mirror. My hand hovered over the box again, trembling with something that felt frighteningly close to hope. The moment I whispered yes, something inside me shifted, like an old lock clicking open after years of rust. Carmen didn't celebrate or smile or act like anything monumental had happened, but her eyes softened with a quiet recognition that made the porch feel strangely sacred. She stood, extended her hand, and said, "Come on, let's go inside where it's warm." I followed her through the sliding door, still clutching the box as if it might float away if I let go. The living room smelled faintly of cinnamon and old books, a comforting kind of familiarity. Yet everything around me felt sharper, almost cinematic, as if my senses were suddenly awake in ways they hadn't been in years. My heartbeat was so loud I was sure she could hear it echo across the room. She guided me toward the hallway mirror, but I froze before reaching it. Seeing my reflection right now felt dangerous, like I might unravel if I looked too closely. Carmen noticed. Instead of insisting, she gently placed her palms on my shoulders. "You don't have to look at yourself yet," she said. "Just breathe." I tried. My lungs felt unsteady, like they were trying to remember how air worked. Every part of me buzzed with anticipation and fear, tangled so tightly I couldn't separate one from the other. My fingers skimmed the edges of the box again, grounding myself in its reality. Carmen walked to her room and returned with a folded blanket. She draped it around my shoulders, an unexpected gesture that made me blink back sudden warmth in my eyes. "This is just exploration," she said. "No commitments, no labels, just you getting a chance to meet parts of yourself you've ignored." Her words echoed through me. Exploration, a simple word with so much weight. I finally lowered myself onto the couch. The box sat open on my lap like an invitation. Inside were items chosen with care. Soft fabrics, warm colors, subtle pieces that didn't scream transformation but whispered possibility. It wasn't a costume or a shock value reveal. It was gentle, thoughtful, almost like Carmen had curated an introduction rather than a makeover. I picked up a pale, fluttery scarf first, more out of nervous curiosity than intention. The material slid like water between my fingers. It wasn't something I'd ever wear in my day-to-day life, yet touching it felt like listening to a truth I'd spent years pretending I couldn't hear. "I don't know how to do any of this," I murmured. "That's the point," Carmen said, sitting beside me. "You're not supposed to know. You're supposed to feel your way through it." Feel, the word lingered. She reached into the box and lifted out a soft cardigan, simple, warm, nothing loud or dramatic. "Try this," she said, holding it out like it was something fragile. I hesitated. My chest tightened again, but this time not from fear alone. There was something else, something fragile and wanting. I slipped the cardigan on slowly, half expecting the sky to split open or alarms to go off. But the world stayed quiet, and the fabric settled on me with surprising comfort. The sleeves hugged my arms in a way that didn't feel foreign. It felt familiar, like a memory I hadn't lived yet. Carmen nodded, as if she could sense the shift inside me. "How does it feel?" I didn't know how to describe it. My throat worked around words that didn't exist yet. "Different," I finally breathed, "but also like I've been holding my breath for a long time." The admission cracked something open. My reflection caught the corner of my vision, softened by the cardigan, shoulders relaxed, expression unguarded. I almost didn't recognize myself, but not in the usual disorienting way. More like seeing a version of me that had been quietly waiting for permission to exist. Then, just as I began to settle into the strange newness, a sudden knock rang out from the front door, sharp, unexpected, jolting through my entire body. I froze. The cardigan suddenly felt too visible, too revealing. My pulse spiked. Carmen's eyes widened slightly. She whispered, "Stay here, don't panic." But panic had already started blooming inside me, thick and fast, as the knocking came again, this time louder. The third knock thundered through the house, each strike landing in the center of my chest. I clutched the cardigan around myself instinctively, as if holding the fabric tighter could somehow make me invisible. The room suddenly felt too bright, too open, like every shadow had retreated and left me exposed. Carmen's voice dropped to a whisper, "I'll handle it." I nodded, though my muscles were locked in place. My heart was beating so quickly it felt like it was trying to outrun my ribs. The soft cardigan, which a moment earlier had felt like a gentle discovery, now felt like a spotlight, an admission I wasn't ready to be caught wearing. As she walked toward the door, the floorboards creaked in a rhythm that made me feel painfully aware of my existence. I didn't know who it was, neighbor, delivery, a friend of hers, but any option sent a cold wave through me. I wasn't prepared to be seen like this, not even halfway through a quiet moment I was still trying to process. I heard the door unlock. Carmen cracked it open only slightly. Her tone changed, bright and casual. "Hey, didn't expect you." My stomach twisted. The voice that answered was familiar enough to make the room tilt. "Sorry for dropping in. I was in the neighborhood." It was my older cousin, Mateo. Of all people. He wasn't someone cruel or unkind, just observant, direct, and hard to hide from. And right now, hiding felt like the only thing keeping me from unraveling. I sank deeper into the couch, willing myself to become part of the cushions. Carmen stepped halfway out the door, body blocking his view inside. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," Mateo replied. "Just wanted to return the charger I borrowed last week." I heard him shift. "You busy?" "Kind of," Carmen answered smoothly. "Just helping someone with something personal." The pause that followed was the longest 3 seconds of my life. Did he hear my breathing? Did he sense something was off? Mateo had this unnerving ability to read a room without even stepping into it. Finally he said, "Got it, I can come back later." "Thanks," Carmen replied, relief sliding into her voice. "I'll text you." The door clicked shut. She locked it. Only then did she exhale, a long, slow breath that mirrored mine, though neither of us had meant to sink like that. She walked back to the living room, and the moment our eyes met, the panic that had been boiling inside me spilled over into words before I could stop them. "I can't do this." Her expression didn't flinch. Instead, she sat beside me, close but not overwhelming. "You just did." I shook my head, fingers trembling around the sleeve. "No," I froze. I felt like everything could fall apart because he knocked. If I can't handle something that small, how am I supposed to handle anything bigger? How am I supposed to handle myself? Carmen listened, her calmness grounding me more than her words. When she finally spoke, she did so gently. "Fear doesn't mean you're not ready. It means you're stepping into something real." I looked down at the cardigan, soft, simple, quietly affirming. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. And yet wearing it felt like admitting something profound, something I'd tiptoed around for years. "It felt right for a moment," I whispered, and then everything felt dangerous. "That's how truth works," she said. "It's comforting until you realize it comes with choices." My breath trembled. She reached out and placed her hand over mine. "You're allowed to take this slowly. You're allowed to be scared. But don't run from the part of you that finally felt seen." Her words settled into me with a quiet gravity. Outside, the storm had eased to a gentle drizzle, tapping softly against the windows. The air felt different, charged, fragile, and oddly hopeful. I found myself breathing a little steadier, the panic ebbing though not fully gone. Carmen squeezed my hand lightly. "Do you want to keep exploring? We can stop at any moment. You're in control." I looked up at her, then down at myself, and then toward the hallway where the mirror waited like an unopened door. The fear was still there, but so was the curiosity. And, if I admitted it, the longing. I swallowed hard, my voice barely a thread. I want to keep going." Carmen smiled, not triumphant, but proud in a warm, quiet way. "Then let's take the next step together." My pulse steadied, just a little, as I rose from the couch and took a slow step toward the hallway, toward the mirror I'd avoided for years. The hallway looked longer than it ever had before, stretched by my own hesitation. Each step felt deliberate, weighted with questions I'd never dared lift into the light. The mirror at the end waited silently, tall, simple, unassuming, yet holding the power to unearth versions of myself I'd kept buried under years of practiced detachment. Carmen walked beside me, not leading, not pushing, just matching my pace. Her presence felt like a quiet anchor in a moment when everything inside me was drifting. When we reached the mirror, I stopped. My breath caught in my throat. The reflection staring back at me was familiar in the most estranged way. Same posture, same guarded eyes, same tension tucked into my shoulders. The cardigan softened the edges slightly, but it wasn't enough to ease the discomfort crawling up my spine. "I don't know how to look at myself without analyzing everything," I murmured. "You don't have to analyze," Carmen said softly. "Just observe. Let yourself see without judgment." But that was exactly the part that terrified me. The reflection felt like a negotiation between who I'd been, who I was pretending to be, and who I wasn't brave enough to name yet. My fingers tightened around the fabric at my collar. Carmen stayed quiet for a moment. Then she stepped behind me and gently adjusted a loose strand of my hair, not styling it, just giving it space to fall in a softer way. The gesture was so subtle, yet my reflection shifted instantly, something about it becoming less rigid. I stared. "I look different," I whispered. "Different how?" I searched for words, less like I'm trying to disappear. Carmen's reflection met mine in the mirror. Exactly. I let the silence sit. The cardigan wasn't a dramatic transformation, but it was a beginning, one that felt both small and monumental. My reflection didn't look feminine in any pronounced way, yet it didn't look entirely like the version of myself I'd grown used to presenting either. It was somewhere in between, a liminal space that felt unexpectedly honest. After a moment, Carmen reached into the box she'd set on the dresser. She pulled out a soft, lightweight hairband, muted in color, simple, nothing that demanded attention. "This isn't about changing you," she said. "It's about letting you shift toward what feels right. You don't have to leap, you just have to lean." My heart thrummed against my ribs. I hesitated, but then I nodded. She handed me the hairband. My hands trembled as I placed it, pulling my hair back loosely. When I looked into the mirror again, the change was subtle, but it mattered. My eyes looked different, brighter, or maybe clearer. It was as if the smallest shift had allowed a hidden softness to emerge. A softness I recognized, in a way that startled me. I didn't know I could look like this," I said quietly. "Like what?" Carmen asked. "Like someone who isn't running." Carmen smiled, gentle, proud, but careful not to overwhelm me. "That's because you're not running in this moment. You're meeting yourself." My throat tightened with emotion I didn't know how to name. The mirror blurred at the edges as my eyes stung, unexpected tears gathering. Not sadness, not joy, something in between relief maybe, or recognition. I wiped at my cheek quickly, embarrassed. "Hey," Carmen said softly. "It's okay. Mirrors don't always show perfection. Sometimes they just show truth." I nodded shakily. But then something unexpected happened. A shift in me so sudden it felt like the air changed. I looked into the mirror again, held my own gaze, and for one flickering second, I didn't see Liam staring back. I didn't see a man. I didn't see someone pretending. I saw someone I had only glimpsed in daydreams I never admitted to having. Someone gentler, someone truer, someone possible. The image vanished as quickly as it appeared, but the imprint stayed, leaving my heart thudding with a strange, luminous fear. "What was that?" I whispered, startled by how shaky my voice sounded. Carmen didn't ask me to explain. She didn't rush. She just placed a hand over my back between my shoulders and said, "Maybe it was you, the you you've been afraid to imagine." My breath trembled. I didn't know how to answer. I didn't know how to move. I didn't even know how to stand in my own skin without feeling like something enormous had just shifted under my feet. But I knew one thing with startling clarity. I wanted to see that flicker again. And that desire felt like the most honest thing I'd allowed myself to feel in years. Carmen spoke gently, breaking the spell. "Do you want to keep exploring? We can go as slowly as you need." I nodded, small, fragile, but filled with intention. "Okay," she said softly. "Then let's take one more step." Carmen led me back toward the living room, not rushing, letting the echo of the mirror moment settle inside me like a tremor that hadn't fully faded. I still felt unsteady, like the ground beneath me was softer than it had been before, as if everything familiar had been replaced with something close but not identical. Yet for the first time, that unfamiliarity didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a doorway. She sat me down on the floor near the coffee table, where the soft lamp cast warm shadows across the room. The storm outside had almost disappeared, leaving only the quiet, rhythmic patter of the last few drops on the window. It made the moment feel hushed, suspended, as if the world was politely stepping back to let me breathe. Carmen knelt beside the box again, sorting through its contents with the care of someone tending to fragile things. She pulled out something simple, a small, neatly organized pouch. When she unzipped it, I saw a collection of subtle items. Soft shades of tinted moisturizer, a brush, a neutral lip balm, a compact mirror. Nothing dramatic, nothing theatrical, everything gentle. My stomach tightened with nerves. I don't think I can, I began, but she lifted a hand, stopping me. This isn't about creating a different person, she said. It's about letting you explore without pressure. I nodded, though my breath still felt thin. She sat cross-legged across from me. Let me show you something small, she said. If you don't like it, we stop. If you do, we keep going slowly. The word slowly soothed something inside me. She dipped a soft brush into the smallest amount of tinted moisturizer and handed it to me. You do it, just a little under the eyes. It's not makeup. Think of it like evening out the shadows you've been carrying. Shadows I'd been carrying. The phrase made something inside me loosen, just a fraction. My hand shook as I lifted the brush, but Carmen's gaze stayed warm, patient. I swept the brush gently beneath my right eye, then the left. The change was subtle, so subtle I wasn't sure anything had happened at all. Yet when I lifted my head to look at her, she smiled. There, she said, look at how your face softened. I felt heat rise in my chest. I can't even tell. You don't have to tell, she replied. You just have to feel. I hesitated, then lifted the small compact mirror. And there it was again, that same flicker I'd seen in the hallway mirror, soft and uncertain but undeniably present. The edges of my reflection looked less harsh, as if someone had gently dimmed a light that had been too bright for too long. I wasn't transformed by any stretch, but I looked approachable, calmer, more like the version of myself that spoke in whispers I always ignored. I swallowed hard. Carmen watched me carefully. What's going through your mind? I don't know, I admitted. It feels strange, but also right. I don't know if that makes sense. It makes perfect sense, she said. Sometimes the truest things feel confusing before they feel clear. I set the mirror down, my hands trembling with a mixture of adrenaline and something quieter, something like anticipation. Carmen reached into the pouch again and took out the soft, neutral lip balm. She didn't hand it to me immediately. Instead, she turned it in her fingers thoughtfully. You can say no, she reminded. You always can. I nodded, even as my pulse thudded with vulnerable curiosity. She extended it to me. I took it. And for a moment, I held it like it was something sacred. Applying it felt intimate, not in any romantic way, but in a way that felt like crossing an unseen threshold. The light sheen it left behind wasn't noticeable, but I noticed it. My reflection noticed it. My heart noticed it most of all. Carmen leaned back, studying me, not like an artist judging a painting, but like someone witnessing a door slowly opening. You look more like yourself, she said quietly. A breath escaped me, unsteady, disbelieving. How can you say that? You barely know what myself is supposed to be. She tilted her head. Maybe you don't give me enough credit, or maybe you don't give yourself enough credit. Her words sank into me with an unexpected heaviness. I lifted the compact mirror again. The face staring back still looked like me, but softened. Bruise edges turned down, tension released, a small light burning where exhaustion used to live. I didn't look like a woman. I didn't look like a man. I looked like something in between, something honest, vulnerable, unfinished. And for the first time in a long, long while, I wasn't repelled by my reflection. I was curious about it. Carmen lowered her voice, barely above a whisper. Tell me what you're feeling right now. I opened my mouth, closed it, tried again. I feel like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff, I said. But instead of looking down, I'm looking forward. She nodded, her eyes warm. Then maybe it's time to take one more step. My pulse fluttered, but this time, not entirely out of fear. Something inside me was waking up. Something I wasn't ready to name, but wasn't willing to run from anymore. I didn't realize how quiet the house had become until I set the compact mirror down and felt the silence wrap around me. It wasn't the heavy silence I was used to, the kind that made my thoughts echo too loudly, but something gentler, like the room itself was holding its breath with me. I felt suspended between who I'd been and who I might be becoming. Carmen closed the pouch of subtle makeup and placed it aside with a kind of reverence, like she understood the weight of what we'd just opened. Then she reached into the cardboard box again, slower this time, as if sensing that the next step required even more care. She pulled out a folded garment, soft, light, a muted shade that didn't scream for attention. It wasn't a dress or anything dramatic. It looked like a simple, comfortable top with a cut that seemed different. Smoother, softer. The kind of thing that wasn't designed to hide someone, it was designed to let them breathe. My breath caught the moment I saw it. Carmen watched my reaction closely. "This might feel like a bigger shift," she said gently. "We don't have to do it tonight if it's too much." I stared at the fabric as though it might disappear if I blinked. Something about it pulled at me, not with force, but with the quiet gravity of a truth I couldn't deny anymore. I wasn't imagining the pull. I wasn't imagining how much I wanted to know how it felt. But the fear was still there, coiled in my chest. "What if I don't recognize myself?" I asked. Her answer came without hesitation. "Then you'll get to meet someone new, someone you've been avoiding for a long time." My throat tightened. She offered the top to me, not insistently, not presumptuously, just an open hand waiting. I took it. The fabric was softer than I expected, with a texture that felt warm even before I held it against my skin. My heartbeat was uneven again, the same rhythm it took on whenever I stood too close to a truth I wasn't sure I was brave enough to touch. "You can change in my room," Carmen said quietly. "I'll stay out here." I nodded, almost mechanically, and stood. My legs felt strangely light, as though my body wasn't used to carrying this mixture of fear and longing at the same time. I walked toward her bedroom slowly, each step echoing louder in my mind than on the floor. When I closed the door behind me, the quiet felt heavier. Not suffocating, just intimate. The room smelled like lavender and old wood. The dim light cast soft shadows across the bedspread, and for a moment I stood there, clutching the garment, unsure if I could actually go through with it. My reflection in the small dresser mirror watched me, the cardigan still framing my shoulders, the subtle touch of moisturizer smoothing the shadows under my eyes. The hairband softened the sharpness of my features. And I saw it again. That flicker. That impossible, delicate hint of someone I'd been terrified to want to be. My breath shuddered. Hands trembling, I changed. The top settled on me slowly, like it was adjusting itself to my shape, learning the lines of my body. The fabric draped differently than anything I'd worn before, following contours I usually tried to hide instead of letting them exist without judgment. My arms, my shoulders, my posture, everything felt unfamiliar yet strangely natural. I turned toward the mirror. And this time, the flicker didn't vanish. This time it stayed. I looked not transformed, not dramatically changed, but undeniably shifted. Not into someone else, into someone truer. Someone whose existence didn't feel like a secret or a misalignment. Someone I'd only seen in dreams I dismissed before I could remember them. I didn't know whether to smile or cry, so I did neither. I just stared, as if afraid that moving might break the fragile reality forming in front of me. A quiet knock came at the bedroom door, gentle, patient. "You okay?" Carmen asked softly through the wood. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. It took me a moment to gather the breath, the courage, the honesty. Finally, in a voice that didn't sound like fear anymore, didn't sound like Liam trying to mask a truth, I whispered, I think I'm okay, maybe more than okay." There was a pause, and then Carmen's voice warmed with a knowing calm. "Can I come in?" I hesitated only a second before answering. "Yeah." She opened the door slowly, as though stepping into something fragile. When she looked at me, her expression changed, softened, widened, warmed in a way that felt like sunlight breaking through. She didn't gasp, she didn't gush, she didn't make a sound that would have shattered the moment. She just smiled. A deep, gentle smile of recognition. "There you are," she said. My breath wavered, and the emotion that flooded my chest was too big to name. Relief, fear, hope, grief, all tangled into one trembling exhale. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was playing dress-up. For the first time, I felt like I was peeling back a curtain I'd been too afraid to touch. And Carmen saw me, not the version I'd performed, but the one trying to surface. "I don't know who I am anymore," I whispered. "You don't have to know," she replied. "You just have to keep listening to the part of you that feels right." I nodded slowly. Because for the first time, that part wasn't silent. It was speaking. Softly but clearly. Carmen stepped fully into the room, but she moved slowly, like she understood that the air around me had become delicate, like a snow globe settling after being shaken. She didn't reach for me. She didn't speak right away. She let me exist in the moment without rushing me out of it, and that alone made my heartbeat steady a little. I turned toward the mirror again, needing to see if the reflection still held. It did. The top draped over me with a softness that felt like a secret finally spoken. My posture, usually tense, constricted, defensive, had softened without my permission. My shoulders weren't hunched. My jaw wasn't clenched. Even my eyes looked different, steadier, like they were finally recognizing the person they'd been avoiding. "It's really you," Carmen said quietly behind me. "I've seen glimpses of this in you before, even when you didn't." "It feels like I'm wearing someone else's skin," I said, voice trembling, "but also like I'm finally breathing in mine." She nodded. "That's what an awakening feels like." Awakening. The word felt too big, too brave, but it fit in a way that made my chest ache. I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to ground myself. Carmen joined me, not too close, but close enough that I could feel her warmth. I looked down at my hands, resting on the fabric, fingers lightly tracing the texture. They didn't look out of place. They didn't look wrong. They looked like they belonged exactly where they were. "I don't know what any of this means," I whispered. "You're not supposed to know yet," she said softly. "You're in the middle of discovering. Meaning comes later." I let that settle, breathing slowly. The quiet in the room felt careful, almost reverent. After a long moment, Carmen added, "Do you want a name for this feeling, or for this version of you?" My chest tightened, not with fear but with something deeper, something like longing. "I don't know," I admitted. "I don't think I'm ready for that yet." "That's completely okay," she said. "A name doesn't define you. Your feelings do. Your comfort does. Your truth does." I swallowed, emotion thickening my voice. What if this is just temporary? What if I'm imagining everything? "You're not imagining the look in your eyes right now," she replied. "That's real. Whatever this becomes, it's real in this moment, and that's enough." Her certainty steadied me more than I expected. I lifted my gaze to the mirror again. The person staring back wasn't fully formed. She was in between, evolving, uncertain, but she wasn't imaginary. She wasn't a mistake. She was becoming. And she was me. A quiet, fragile realization settled over me. I didn't want to take the top off. I didn't want to undo what I just allowed myself to feel. Carmen seemed to sense the shift. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. "Yeah," I murmured. "You look peaceful. I don't think I've ever seen you look peaceful before." The words hit me like a soft wave. I hadn't realized how much of my life had been spent bracing, against expectations, against myself, against a reflection that felt foreign. This peace was small, tentative, but it was there, and it was mine. A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. Not a sob, just a quiet release. I wiped it away quickly, embarrassed. "You don't have to hide that," Carmen said gently. I looked down, voice barely audible. "I'm not sure I know how to let myself feel all of this." "That's why I'm here," she said. "Not to guide you somewhere you're not ready for, but to walk beside you while you figure out where you want to go." I let those words sink in. They felt like a hand on my back, not pushing, not pulling, just steadying. The emotional weight in the room shifted again, lighter this time, more hopeful. Carmen stood and offered her hand. "Come back to the living room. I want to show you something." I hesitated, looking like this. Exactly like this, she answered. If you're comfortable. I looked at the mirror once more. The reflection didn't scare me now. It didn't confuse me. It felt like a truth unfolding slowly, petal by petal. I nodded. I placed my hand in hers. And for the first time all night, I didn't flinch at being seen. As we walked back toward the living room, my hand still in Carmen's, I felt an unfamiliar steadiness in my steps, light, tentative, but undeniably real. The world hadn't changed around me. The walls, the floorboards, the lingering cinnamon scent, all of it was the same. But I wasn't the same. Something inside me had shifted in a way I couldn't reverse, even if I wanted to. When we reached the living room, Carmen let go of my hand gently, giving me space without taking away her presence. She crossed to the bookshelf and pulled out a small photo album, one I recognized but hadn't opened in years. "What's that for?" I asked, easing down onto the couch, the soft fabric of the top settling around me with a kind of natural grace I still couldn't fully believe. She sat beside me and opened the album to the first page. It wasn't one of those gleaming, curated albums full of perfect moments. It was a patchwork, sticky note corners, mismatched sleeves, photos that were slightly off-centered. Real life, captured without filters. The first picture was of us as kids. I felt a dull ache settle in my chest. In the photo, I was maybe 9 years old, sitting cross-legged in the grass with Carmen. She was holding a daisy chain she'd made. I remembered that day vividly, not because of the activity, but because of the feeling. I remembered wanting a flower crown too, but I'd pretended I didn't care. Pretended I didn't want to look gentle, pretty, soft. I turned the page. Another photo, me, probably 10 or 11, helping Carmen with her art project. I had paint on my hands, and the expression on my face was open, unguarded. That softness again, before I learned to hide it. Another page. 12 years old, wearing one of Carmen's hats as a joke, but the smile on my face wasn't joking. I looked light, free, a version of myself I'd buried before I even understood why. I swallowed hard. "Why are you showing me these?" "Because I want you to see something," she said softly. I frowned, flipping back to the first page, then the second, then the third. The progression wasn't linear, but the pattern was unmistakable. "I don't get it," I whispered. "I look normal." "No," she said gently. "You look like you, not the version of you that tried to fit expectations. The real you, the one who felt safest with me, the one who wasn't afraid to be soft." My throat tightened painfully. Carmen continued, "You've always had this openness to you, a gentleness, a softness. You never had to force it, it was just there. But somewhere along the way, you got scared of what it meant, scared of how people might read it. So you built walls, bit by bit." I kept staring at the photos, my chest a tangled knot of recognition and grief. "And now," she said quietly, touching the sleeve of the top I was wearing, "this isn't new, this isn't sudden. This is a part of you that's been waiting. These moments back then, they were hints, glimpses." Glimpses. The word rung through me like a quiet bell. I wasn't becoming someone entirely new. I was uncovering someone I'd been all along. I ran my thumb over one of the photos, tracing the younger version of myself, so unaware of how complicated growing up would become. "I didn't think anyone noticed," I said. "I noticed," she replied, "but I waited for you to notice too." Tears welled up before I could stop them. Quiet, unhurried tears that didn't come from sadness, but from the weight of finally understanding myself with clarity I had never allowed before. "I don't know who I am," I whispered, voice breaking, "but I know who I'm not anymore." Carmen nodded with unmistakable tenderness. "That's the beginning." I closed the album slowly. The living room felt warmer than before, soft lamplight, soft clothes, soft realization settling into my bones. I wasn't ready to choose labels. I wasn't ready to declare anything definite. But I also wasn't afraid of the mirror anymore. I wasn't afraid of softness. I wasn't afraid of the flicker. After a long silence, Carmen asked in a gentle voice, "How do you feel right now? Be honest." I breathed in deeply, once, then twice. The answer rose inside me with surprising clarity. I feel like I'm finally aligned, I said. Not complete, not certain, but aligned. Like the inside of me and the outside of me aren't fighting for once. Carmen smiled, that same warm, steady smile she'd shown me the moment she opened the box hours ago. That's all I wanted for you. I leaned back into the couch, the fabric brushing my arms with a comfort that felt like a second skin. Outside, the storm had fully passed. The sky was quiet, still, clear. And inside, for the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt the same way. Not finished, not perfect, not labeled, but open, becoming. And that was enough.